is Mount Rushmore? Who made it? And what is its significance? Let's find out in today's episode of the History Chronicles. Hello, I'm Alex and welcome to the History Chronicles. If you like our work, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel in return for exclusive perks, please visit our Patreon page. Now, on with the video. Before Mount Rushmore became what it is today, the area which would encompass Mount Rushmore was part of the Black Hills, known to the Lakota as Paha-Sapa. The Black Hills rise 5,000 feet above the surrounding area and are located near the center of the country. The distinct signature look of the Black Hills is not a result of the rock, but of the ponderosa pine trees which cover the region. This area covers a space of 125 miles long and 65 miles wide, with a unique terrain of rugged mountains, canyons and gulches, open grasslands, streams and deep lakes. When the United States signed the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868, it was clear that the territory of the Black Hills had been set aside for the Lakota. During the Great Sioux War of 1876-77, the American Army would force the Lakota onto reservations as a result of white settler incursions and increased hostilities between the two groups. Ultimately, the Native Americans were forced back onto the reservation when Congress withheld food rations and the United States took the Black Hills from the Lakota, overriding the 1868 treaty. The Lakota, according to Black Elk, are the Black Hills, and to separate one from the other would break the circle and cut the heart from the body. Following this, settlers moved into the region, and as the 20th century arrived, along with the invention of the automobile, tourism in America began to boom. Travel for pleasure had been a consistent aspect of life for the elites of American society, but the automobile made it affordable for the average family. Families had primarily traveled by train to reach their destinations, but Henry's Model T, built in 1908, allowed the family to afford a reliable car. This was at the same time as the start of the Lincoln Highway project. And while it did not go through the Black Hills, it did begin to make travel much easier. In fact, it was this increase in travel that led Dwayne Robinson, South Dakota's state historian, to begin looking for a location for a tourist attraction that would bring in revenue for the state. Robinson began searching for a sculptor and initially reached out to Laredo Taft, but his health had deteriorated and he would be unable to oversee the project. Robinson had to decide between Daniel French, the man who would finish the Lincoln Memorial, and Gutzon Borglum, the man who worked on the Confederate monument at Stone Mountain. Ultimately, Robinson decided to reach out to Borglum, and it was the right time, as the Stone Mountain project had begun to fall apart. The money, politics, and control of the project had begun to slip from his hands, and he wished he could get away. The proposal from Robinson would give him the opportunity. Borglum had the reputation of being egotistical, a behavior that hampered his Stone Mountain project. He had also been an avid supporter of the Ku Klux Klan, which had seen a revival in 1915 through a secret ceremony at Stone Mountain. It was these biases which would eventually influence Borglum in his creation of Mount Rushmore. During his visit, Borglum stood atop Harney Peak and stated, "We walked through a veritable garden of the gods. I know the West, yet I know of no grouping of rock formation that equals those found about this mountain in the Black Hills of South Dakota, nor do I know of any so near the center of our country that is so available to the nation or so suitable for colossal sculpture." Robinson knew a project of this scale would need funding, and a preliminary $10,000 was suggested, but that would require approval from the legislature. So Borglum, urged by Robinson, approached Senator Norbeck to support the proposal. While Norbeck wholly believed in the project, he was more of a realist than even Robinson, and understood there would be delays along with a significant cost. Since their first visit, two major events had occurred. In February of 1925, two separate state and federal bills were being pushed to start funding for the project, while the situation at Stone Mountain had become untenable. Borglum had a warrant issued for his arrest along with his sculptor, J.G. Tucker, for malicious mischief in connection with destruction of working plans and models. Now that Borglum was away from Stone Mountain, he could focus on the Black Hills project. Ultimately, the South Dakota legislature rejected their proposal, mainly over money. But this did not dissuade Robinson, and the pair would continue to push. Before his arrival in Rapid City on the 11th of August 1925, Borglum had decided to add Theodore Roosevelt to the subject list, and it was during his trip to Rapid City where Borglum would decide to add the final president to the monument. Borglum was a believer in the great man theory, the theory that great men shaped history of their era, and as such, he wanted a monument on a grand scale to represent these American heroes. As such, George Washington was an easy first choice. No one had been loved by the public as much as Washington, although it would be ironic that during the search for private donors to fund the monument, Washington failed to garner support. Following Washington, Lincoln was decided as the next president to join the monument. His ascension from a poor frontier boy to the White House had made him a celebrity, while assassination had made him a martyr. Lincoln fever had grasped the nation, and so it was clear that Lincoln would join the Black Hills Project. But who else would join him? This honor would go to Borglum's good friend and mentor, Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt was the leader of the progressivism movement within the Republican Party and had originally been placed into the vice president position in order to prevent him from furthering his agenda. This would be undone when President McKinley was assassinated, propelling Roosevelt into office. As with many Americans of the era, he was enamored with Roosevelt's personal image. Lastly, it was decided that Thomas Jefferson would join the monument due to his contribution of being the first great expansionist, as a result of his purchase of the Louisiana Territory and his authorship of key documents from the American Revolution. Borglum had his 4 presidents, but needed to select the site itself. There were multiple locations that had gorgeous views, yet Mount Rushmore spoke to him. It is possible this was because of its similarities to Stone Mountain, in that it turned its best face south and east, which was the ideal orientation that Borglum had envisaged for this monument. Even though he had his 4 main figures, he had further dreams of expanding the current group to include statesmen such as Lewis and Clark, Sam Houston, and others. Many proposed famous Native Americans like Sitting Bull, but he stated, "I have no objection to a Sitting Bull monument, but that the friends of Sitting Bull would have to raise the money." The next 2 years would prove to be significantly difficult for the Black Hills Project, as Borglum, Robinson, and Norbeck desperately tried to raise funds. Major donors like Rockefeller had backed out of the project, leading to a multitude of different approaches. Some presidents were easier to raise funds for than others. As with Roosevelt's death in 1919, there had been plenty of support for a monument to him. Jefferson received conditional pledges, while Lincoln had tentative measures in place. Meanwhile, Washington seemed to, quote, "not have a friend in the world." However, the status of Mount Rushmore would change in the summer of 1927 when an unexpected visitor vacationed in the Black Hills. That visitor was President Calvin Coolidge. President Coolidge's vacation to the Black Hills sparked immediate interest in the project, and it allowed Borglum to bring on Jesse Tucker, the carver from the Stone Mountain project, to begin work. The official start date was the 4th of October 1927, with the project expecting to take 5 years and cost $437,000. Borglum had given express orders to only use light explosives. As geologists had warned him, Rushmore was not a single piece of granite, but was made up of numerous gigantic lobes of rock pressed tightly together like cloves of garlic. As much as Borglum wanted to move ahead with the project, it came to a halt as the funds had begun to run dry, and its progression rested on the Rushmore Bill in Congress, which would provide for $250,000 of funding, but only if Mount Rushmore could privately raise the same amount. The Rushmore Bill passed on the 22nd of February 1929, just a week before Coolidge left office. Work resumed until the snow hit the mountain and the funds dried up. Yet by September of that year, Tucker was to storm off the project as a result of not having received pay for over 2 years, although Borglum had also not yet been paid himself either. At the time, he was forced to give Calvin Dennison and William Tolman the role of overseeing the carving, even though they were completely inexperienced. This wouldn't be the only setback, as the stock market crashed in October and all private funding dried up. If Mount Rushmore was to be completed, it would have to survive entirely off of public funds. Despite these setbacks, the head of Washington would be finished and dedicated on the 4th of July 1930, though much more work would be needed. Borglum had run his funds dry again and would lose Calvin Dennison. Borglum would replace him with Hugh Viller, another carver from Stone Mountain. They began working on Jefferson in 1931, although a huge mistake would be made as they initially started to carve Jefferson on the left side of Washington, only to find out the stone was impossible to work with. While Borglum was away in Europe for the unveiling of a small statue of Woodrow Wilson, Viller had become relaxed over the image of Jefferson, and as a result, Borglum fired him in August when he returned. Borglum blasted Jefferson's face off the mountain and decided to move him to the right side of Washington. Despite Viller wasting valuable time and money, the results of his mistakes led to a more pleasing picture on the mountain. Yet by 1932 the project stalled again, and work had to pause, though they were able to work for 2 months in 1933, when they refined Washington's head, shaped the new Jefferson, and began working on Lincoln. This new work would be the result of the Italian immigrant Luigi Del Bianco, as Borglum had asked him to become the chief carver at Mount Rushmore. Del Bianco had a long history of working for Borglum, and it would be his responsibility to oversee the refinement of expressions on the faces of the monument. Despite Del Bianco's arrival, the problems continued to mount, as like others, Del Bianco failed to receive pay and would have quit if he had not been supported by Borglum. He would continue to stay during the 1933 season. It would also be during the 1933 season that the National Park Service would take control of the jurisdiction of Mount Rushmore, mainly at Borglum's insistence, due to rising tensions between the board and him. Although this would eventually cause issues between the Secretary of the Interior and Borglum over funds and payments. Del Bianco would return again in 1935, finishing Washington's head in 1936, along with Jefferson's head in August of 1936. Del Bianco did not return for part of the season in 1937 as his wife had fallen ill, and it had been recommended he be released for failure to report for work. This was approved by the Secretary of the Interior on the 28th of June 1937. But with Borglum's insistence that Mount Rushmore could not be completed without him, he would be reinstated and work for part of the 1937 season. Del Bianco would not return until 1940, yet work would continue on as Roosevelt was dedicated on the 2nd of July 1939. Even before Mount Rushmore had been finished, it attracted 300,000 people each year. As 1941 came, Borglum had promised the entire monument would be completed by the 1st of July, and with his chief carver returning, they could make the finishing touches and clean up the rubble below. Yet with the increase in aggression from Nazi Germany with its attacking of American shipping lines, the government decided to pull public funding from Mount Rushmore and make it a privately funded project. As a result, Borglum took off to Chicago to raise funds, but he suffered a blood clot in his heart on the 6th of March 1941 and passed away. Borglum's son Lincoln would oversee the cleanup of the construction site, although many of the pieces had not been fully completed to Borglum's wishes. The official end date for the Mount Rushmore project was the 31st of October 1941. The construction of Mount Rushmore took 14 years to complete, with a total cost of $989,000, of which the federal government provided $836,000. Despite the fact that the government had concluded the construction of Mount Rushmore, there were multiple attempts to add to Borglum's creation. Various groups pushed for the addition of Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, John Wayne, and Elvis Presley, although these attempts were all in vain. Borglum's death had sealed Mount Rushmore's expansion and future for good. Mount Rushmore, as of 2020, has drawn the attention of over 2 million people and generates $184.2 million for the South Dakota economy. It became a major source of revenue, just as Robinson had imagined. Its place in American history is as iconic as the Declaration of Independence, the Independence Bell, and the Statue of Liberty. Its granite features were created and carved with the utmost love for America and her principles, and as we look towards the future, we know Mount Rushmore will last for a very long time. Since Mount Rushmore is made from granite, it will erode roughly 1 inch every 10,000 years. After 500,000 years, the faces will have lost some of their definition, while the noses alone could last up to 2.4 million years before they completely wear away. It is believed at the current rate, the basic shape of the president's heads might last up to 7 million years. Numerous things are being done to preserve Mount Rushmore, including the use of 8,000 feet of fibre optic cable, which was installed in 2009. One thing is for certain, Borglum's vision of Mount Rushmore withstanding the test of time is certain to be a reality, and any future civilizations will be able to stand in awe and gaze at it like the pyramids of Giza. You've been watching the History Chronicles. We'd love to know what you think of Mount Rushmore. Please let us know below, and if you enjoyed our video, please give us a like and subscribe. It really helps us out. Also, if you'd like to support our work going forward, please visit our Patreon page, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the History Chronicles.